examination. Pardon? Okay. If you have to make a X-ray examination on a population mammography screening, you must follow these criteria. So in some way, it's a kind of general rules that must be applied. Another comment is this one. Everything is coming from the United Nations. And you know that the agency can talk to the country which are within the United Nations. Second step is that when these guidelines appear, these guidelines are mandatory for the single government. So, for example, yesterday we discussed how to introduce accreditation in the single country. Some country has no way to make accreditation of the medical physicists, but they are until now not following the rules that they have accepted. This means that they must apply the indication by the agency. What happened in Europe? In Europe, there is another step because what is indicated by the guideline of the agency is adopted by a European directive. And after that, each country within the European community must have national regulation of this. So you see that there is a step for some country which is not in the United Nations. Behind the acceptance to the agency, there is the application of the law. So this is just to make you a comment. These safety standard appeared 3 years ago in 2018, and they adopt again, they improve and adopt a new indication, but at that time when they publish, they become mandatory for the government. Here you see the content of the safety standard, and you can see that there is some overlap with the topic we discussed yesterday, because yesterday we were indicating which was the rule of the medical physicist, and my intention was to indicate that the rules are following the syllabi, the curricula, and the real application of this rule. So we had to up-to-date the rules. If we have some new equipment introducing in the market, we can say, well, we must increase our competence covering also the new equipment. This is because it's useful to have not only a basic cultural background, but also to follow a long life learning. So, for example, the webinar that are given very often by the IOMP and also by our association, it could be a good example how to give long life learning, because they are covering one topic, very up-to-date presentation of the status of art, and then they will permit to follow the technological and methodological improvement in physics applied to medicine. So you see that you have this list, there is some overlap, but anyway, please consider that there are some indication very specific. because in one appendix you have indication how to avoid of pregnancy following radiopharmaceutical therapy. This means that it's very narrow, but anyway, this guideline cover all the aspects. In 1 hour, it's impossible to enter and to discuss deeply in each topic. But anyway, I hope to give you some indication. Again, surely all of you knows that in the application of radiological imaging, we must follow 3 principles: justification, optimization, and limitation. Justification of practice is clear. This is not the first time you are hearing something mentioning justification of practice. Adopting a practice that entail exposure to ionizing radiation only if they yield sufficient benefit to the exposed individual or to society to outweigh the radiation detriment. And in the radiation detriment, you must consider not only the cost of the practice, but also the risk and which could be the detriment. In a screening program in mammography, you can calculate how many cancer to screen 1,000 of women can bring. And if you make the calculation, you can see that in a population of 30,000 lady, from I am remembering a calculation was made by an excellent scientist, a medical doctor from Sweden, and because in Sweden they were making the first mammographic screening in the population of lady in the area of Malmö, in the lady from the age of 40 up to 60. Well, to follow this population for many years with a mammographic examination every 2 years cost in terms of cancer induced by the mammographic examination 6 cancer. So this means to make a balance. Nowadays, you are following the discussion about the use of the vaccine in the pandemic. Who is against the vaccine say, oh, but there are some detriment because the vaccine can have this, and mention only the damage, but it's completely different. The right approach is that you are using the vaccine for a large population, possibly 100%, accepting that some people over million can have some detriment. But anyway, this is clear when that is. So justification, optimization. Optimization of protection and safety is also important. And here you will find one role for the medical physicist. Why? Because in radiological examination, which is the balance, then what you had to optimize. You have on one side the image quality, on the other side you have the dose delivered during the radiological examination to the patient. What does it mean? This means that, for example, you had to reduce the irradiation of the individual patient until you get a acceptable diagnostic quality in the image. A big optimization was made when we leave the traditional, until some 10 years ago, detector, film plus screen. When we were able to adopt as a detector, a digital detector, we will have immediately an optimization of the radiological practice. And what this means, optimization when you are using a digital detector in radiology, to have when you are dealing with quality of the digital image, you have to think to reduce noise, because the limitation in digital imaging is given by the noise. So to make optimization means to reduce the noise while you keep the image quality. To reduce the noise means to reduce the exposure. We have no time to enter in this process, but anyway, this is a good example which could be the role of the medical physicist adopting a new detector to optimize its use. Limitation of dose. Of course, this is absolutely a must when you are dealing with radiation used by workers. But what does it mean? In this case, when we discuss about radiology, we are discussing to limit the doses for patients. And you cannot declare that this patient, the maximum exposure he can have per year is 5 CT scan. Why? Because if he needs scan, if you have justification of the use of the CT scan to get a benefit, the diagnosis or the follow-up of some illness, you cannot say, oh, sorry, the threshold for you is 5 examinations per year. So you had to have a different approach. You had to permit the justified number of X-ray radiation, but you had to adopt some other criteria. So if you are dealing with limitation of dose, here application to medical exposure, limitations of doses do not apply to medical exposure. For example, finally, you can find again, look, this is in justification of medical exposure, GS3, part 3. This means this is another document, which is a basic safety standard. But in the basic safety standard, you have some requirement about justification of medical exposure. And here you see a list of criteria that justify the medical exposure. Appropriateness of the request. The medical doctor, the family doctor must justify their request. Then the patient go to the specialist in radiology to have the X-ray examination. Urgency of the radiological procedure, the characteristic of medical exposure, the characteristic of individual patient, relevant information from patient previous radiological procedure. You don't have this indication in the documents, in the guideline I mentioned. That is the title of our discussion. But you have in the basic safety standard. So, suggestion: if you had to criticize, to have a knowledge of the problem, you must read both this document and the other document. Again, you see in the same GSL part 3, justification in asymptomatic individual, mammography screen, volunteer. So you must integrate. Very often very often the application of justification principle to medical exposure require a special approach. So 3 levels. One level we have seen. You must have more benefit than detriments. Okay. The next level could be a generic justification given to a radiological procedure and should be carried out by the health authority in conjunction with appropriate professional bodies. Here you find another role. Why for the medical physicist? Why? Because if you skip from level 1 to level 2, surely the radiologist, medical doctor, has to carry out the procedure. But as we are dealing also with doses, surely at the level of authority must enter also the professional body of medical physicists. Optimization. Optimization, we have already discussed what does it mean, but in this, again, GSR part 3, we have this indication. In addition to the ensuring the responsibility we have seen, registrants and licenses in cooperation with the supplier shall ensure that the medical radiological equipment and software that could influence the delivery of medical exposure are used only if they conform to the applicable standard of the International Electrotechnical Commission and IOS.
Oh yeah.
So this is very important, because you find here another aspect, that the optimization is a kind of joint effort, not only by the medical physicist, not only by the medical doctor specialized in radiology, but also the manufacturer and also these international bodies. So it's very important. A special attention is put to image-guided interventional procedure. Why? Because not all the X-ray examination are giving the same amount of radiation to the patient. When you are dealing with image-guided interventional procedure, it could be possible that the exposure of the patient can bring to exposure of the skin which overcome the threshold for damage of the skin. And this will appear some months later. What does it mean? That the interventional procedure can require also 1 hour of radioscopy. So a special attention must be put in optimization of the protection in this special activity. And in this case, where is the contribution of the medical physicist? Because they are not present in the surgery room. The role is to make training of the medical doctor, of the surgery, in order that they become accustomed with the use of ionizing radiation, and they can adopt some technical approach in the irradiation. If they have 1 hour exposure, they must change the entrance field of the X-ray equipment. So they can turn. Of course, they must join knowledge of how to manage the irradiation given by the medical physicist with their professional, because they are the king when they are in the surgery room. What they decide is good because they are working for the benefit, immediate benefit of the patient. So you see that between the line, you can read also the role of the medical physicist and the competence in the specific activity. Appropriate medical radiological equipment and software. One of the last slides that I presented yesterday was looking really to the future. To use the software means to use also and to be educated what could bring the adoption of artificial intelligence. Because when in the future you will have hundreds of workstations driven by artificial intelligence, and the medical doctor will give their diagnosis using this workstation, you must take into account if the software has some bug, if the software has some bias. So you must have a knowledge of the software. And it's not only to have full knowledge of the radiotherapy treatment planning in radiotherapy, like nowadays. You will have also in general radiology, because be sure that in the future, 50% of the activity will be covered by artificial intelligence and deep learning. Appropriate technique and parameter to deliver a medical exposure of the patient that is the minimum necessary to fulfill the clinical purpose of the radiological procedure. So you see that you have another role is communicate with the other profession in order to agree and to work for the benefit of the patient. In this guideline, you have a couple of indicators which are very, very useful in the optimization process. One is the optimization, simply to mention optimization, and we discussed already a bit about optimization, and the other is dose reference level. In X-ray medical imaging, image-guided interventional procedure and diagnostic nuclear medicine, of course, this is possible. You had to use diagnostic reference level. Why not in radiotherapy? Because in radiotherapy, the therapeutic reference level is established patient by patient. When the radiotherapist make the plan of the patient, he choose the total dose and the fractionation. And the goal is to obtain an accurate dose to the target volume, or better, to the clinical volume, okay? But when you are in X-ray medical imaging, you have to add also diagnostic nuclear medicine. But anyway, we are dealing with radiology, and so we had to mention diagnostic reference level. As a medical physicist, you had to assess periodically which are the typical patient dose. Okay, how you can do? Before entering and to describe how you can determine the dose reference level, I want to be back to mention which are the dosimetric quantity that can be useful for dose reference level. And here I'm using a scheme where you have the indication of the geometry of an X-ray exposure of patient, and also some dosimetric quantity. Here you have the focus. Here you have probably the first detector you are using, that you had to use for each examination, which is a Kerma air product. You have here a parallel plane ionization chamber with very thin electrodes, foil of Mylars, some very, very resistant, but very, very thin. And why you are measuring this one? So this is the product of the Kerma, which is the kinetic energy released to air per unit of matter, multiply the area. Why is useful this dosimetric quantity? Because this dosimetric quantity is independent on the distance from the focus as a first approximation you have. What does it mean? If you measure here a cap, the cap is the same here and is the same here, approximately. Why? Because you have air. This characteristic is valid only for two conditions. One is that you have that the focus is point source, but is not a point source in our case, because the dimension of the focus, if you are in radiology, could be 0.6 millimeter or 1.2 millimeter, is not a point. And the other is given by the attenuation by the hail. The hail have very low density, 1,000 less than the density of the water, but in some way attenuate, very small, but attenuate the X-ray beam. And so this means that you adopt that what you measure here is the same that you measure here, but this is an approximation. But again, what you can measure here? Here is supposed to be the surface of the patient. If you make the measure here, you have air Kerma in air. What happens if you have the patient? If you have the patient, you have best scatter. And so what you're measuring here, if you have the patient or a phantom, is the entrance surface air Kerma. This quantity, dosimetric quantity, include best scatter. So after that, you move, you have a scatter radiation, and you have the image receptor. And probably another quantity could be, which could be the air Kerma reaching the detector. So these are what you need. And another dosimetric quantity is the yield of the X-ray tube that you get at a certain distance, 1 meter, on the central axis of the X-ray tube. Okay, so this means you must refer to this kind of, if you are in radioscopy, you had to use cap per minute, cap per hour. So you will use the Kerma rate that you can have in the irradiation condition. Okay, these are the quantity. There are 3 levels for those reference. One is those reference level for the country. The second could be for the region, and the third could be in the hospital. In my opinion, what is useful is this one, those reference level you have in the hospital. Why? Because if you are in the States, you can compare those reference level, depends also on the equipment, depends also on the detector. You cannot have a dose reference level in the States if in the States you have difference in the equipment. Probably in some not very rich country, you can have very far from the capital a very poor radiological department with a film screen detector. How you can impose the respect of those reference level to this hospital if he has very old equipment? The same could be in the region. Don't care if you are 20 kilometers far from the capital, you can have the same problem. So for you, it will become important to determine the dose reference level in your hospital. Which are the dose reference level? How you can get, and this is the job of the medical physicist. You have to take a single equipment, you have to take a single X-ray examination, for example, anteroposterior chest examination. Okay, then you have to collect the exposure that you are given to the patient, performing only this chest anteroposterior examination for that equipment. You collect data, and then you will have an histogram. Why you will have an histogram? Because you can have some fluctuation in the doses, in the equipment, output. Then you can have a very thin patient, you can have very big patient, you can have a lot of different patient size, and you bring everything in a histogram where on the x-axis you bring interval of doses, for example, of Kerma cap. On the y-axis you bring how many patients you have, and what do you call those reference level is for that particular procedure, for that particular equipment, the value which rounded to the 75 percentile of the distribution you have get in the way I described to you for that room or facility. What does it mean? This means that if you adopt this dose reference level, 75% of the examination, specific examination, will give a dose equal or less of this value. 25% will be higher. Of course, what we are missing in this procedure, we are missing image quality, because we are measuring something which is related with patient irradiation, and we forget the results in morphology. So we are supposing that image quality is adequate for the medical purpose. The index I mentioned CAP, but you can use one of these air Kerma area product, as I told you, in fluoroscopy, air Kerma product per minutes, perhaps, then you have to, okay. In CT, you can have or CT air Kerma index or CT air Kerma length product. In mammography and tomosynthesis, incident air Kerma or entrance surface air Kerma, and mean glandular dose. In dentistry, incident air Kerma for intraoral radiography, and air Kerma product for panoramic or equipment or combo CT. In image-guided interventional procedure, air Kerma product or cumulative reference air Kerma at the patient entrance reference point. You see what we are using. When I talk with you, I'm using your competence, because I suppose that you have a good knowledge, you have a good competence in in dosimetry. You can, if you have only instruction how to deal, you will have only a good skill to make measurements, evaluation of those reference levels. So if you want to have a very important role, you must take into account that you have competence. So, for example, I would be curious, but stay silent. In the audience today, how many of you have this concept of air kerma, entrance surface air kerma, and so on? So please, anonymously, when you receive the questionnaire to give a judgment to my presentation, but also of the other teacher, please indicate that for you is not clear the concept of entrance surface air kerma. Why? Because this gives us an indication what we can ask to the future participant to take the measure benefit from our lecture. If Professor Golam today, tomorrow, we will use something which is in your cultural background, you miss information, you miss knowledge, and for us could be important. To exclude participants? No, simply when the society will make a call for application, will indicate it is requested to have knowledge of this. So please give us this anonymously, this indication. Is not to tell that you are good or not good participant. Is simply to permit us to understand, because sometimes we cannot know each other. All of you are coming from country very far from Bangladesh, from India, from Italy, and so give us this kind of information. And here you see, you must be able to build this, let me see what time, okay, I will be a little bit faster. Here you bring, for example, in this case, entrance skin dose. This means that this range is a range of air kerma measure, including the backscatter contribution, okay? And we are dealing with patient. This means that you have made some measurements on the skin of the patient. If you want to work, but it's time consuming, and this means quite impossible, you can use a phantom. Anyway, you see, in this case, only one case. In this case, 17, but the statistic is a bit poor. So what is those reference level? Is this value? Is jumping here. You are not giving a range, you are giving a value. And you leave 25% of the patient have received a dose higher than this entrance skin dose. 75 are this one receive one dose less. You see, you can use those reference level in dental radiology. And here I took this one from some publication. Here you have the use of film as a detector. RF with adult is they were using film, digital detector in adult, in pediatric. And what you see, of course, I can criticize that the sample size is a bit different, because in this case you have 300 patients, here you have 96. But anyway, the statistic is not so perfect as I like. But what you see that the dose reference level, which is the third quartile here, is simply moving from film to digital detector the third quartile decreased from 3.39 to 1.33. What about pediatric? From 1.81 to 0.63. So you see that this is a good tool to make optimization. Easy? No. It's easy to calculate, to evaluate those reference level, but the main point is that you want to have this decrease in doses, you have to buy a new detector. So it's not easy. It doesn't depend on us, but you can make pressure. I have another example. This could be, sorry, okay, I will go here. Here you have those reference level. You see the same information. You are taking into account chest, posterior, anterior, lateral, lumbar, hospital A and hospital B. Which has, in my opinion, the best equipment, hospital A or hospital B? Clear. Hospital B has probably, I had to, anyway, you have the possibility to compare the dose reference level between different equipment, probably between different X-ray protocol, chest, posterior, anterior, but which is the distance? Probably which is the kilovoltage? You had to make your evaluation. If you are back, you can make a comparison within the same hospital between only two equipment. Okay, you can, again, in this case, you can have a third quartile, chest, posterior, anterior, and you can see chest and beside chest X-ray. So you see the difference. While very often you are taking chest X-ray to make your evaluation, because in the radiological practice, the protocol are very, very different from one hospital to another hospital, from one technician to another technician. This is another point. Again, any things I want to conclude? No, here. How you can evaluate those reference levels? There are software which are able, please consider that in a modern radiology activity, we are using digital detector, and the information about the patient examination is stored in a PACS, picture archiving communication system. This software is free of charge, is distributed by a consortium of European university. If you go and make your own research on the web and you dial OpenRAM with Google, okay, you will get this page. You can download this software. This software can read the content of the PACS, and of the PACS is, you know that in the PACS, the format of the image is following DICOM. You have two types of DICOM, DICOM and DICOM RT. DICOM is taking into account images in radiology. DICOM RT is taking into account images in radiotherapy. You see, this is another point that where the medical physicist must have a knowledge. Why? Because you are using this database and this DICOM to make this kind of evaluation using a free software. So why you are using this DICOM information? Because in the DICOM header, there are recorded all the parameters of the irradiation: kilovoltage, time, milliamp second, and dosimetric index. So you can build this one, building just using this kind of software. Here you have some example. These are just taken. And another strong point, I hope to have 3 minutes. Another strong point is to make quality assurance and optimization, but probably we need to have some more hour to discuss about this. Those limit we don't apply. This is clear. Just we mentioned this one. For occupational and the public exposure, we had those limits, and you find here in our SO. And this other point is this one. Those constraints is in the agency documents that we had those constraints of 1 millisievert per year. But we are free. The states are free to adopt those constraints less than 1. For example, in the United States, in UK, they are using 0.3 millisievert. In Finland, they are using 0.1. In Malta, they are using 0.25. What does it mean? This means that this will bring effect on shielding of the X-ray room. But anyway, here, the decision must be a state decision. So we have to follow the local rule. Quality assurance is important. Please consider that the resource material standard is clear. They must be decided by professional body. Professional body. This means National Medical Physicists Society or International Medical Physicists Society. Okay, we have discussed also this one. Also, recognition and qualification, accreditation of medical physicists is due following the rules of these guidelines. Important also to put the hand on digital information system and PACS. Okay, so we are at the end, and I hope you enjoy the presentation, and I am waiting for your question. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you, sir, for your very knowledgeable talk.
So you must collect the question if they are, and please, the audio is okay. So let me put attention.
It is time for pick up some question from our participants.
Yeah.
Our first question is from One Money. How can radiation dose to the patient undergone to CT measured? Is it same for helical and cone beam CT?
Cone beam CT doses, in my opinion, cone beam CT are the most horrible equipment we can deal with. Why? Because you have many manufacturers, including from China and exotic country because they are a little bit, no, I'm joking. But anyway, you have surely not less of 30 manufacturers in the world building cone beam CT. And in cone beam CT, there is not a very in CT, you have two approaches. I found a difference in the hardware and also a bit in the software between, I am obliged to mention, Toshiba and the other. Toshiba has original hardware and original software. What does it mean? This means that GE, Siemens, and Philips are adopting the same style. So you have a kind of harmonization. Okay, no problem. They are leader, they are in competition, and you can adopt the same approach. And the doses are very similar. And the beam quality is very similar in CT scan performed by each of these manufacturers. This is not true for Combin CT because they adopt different hardware. Of course, they need to have a detector, an X-ray tube, and so on. And also the software is very, very, so for example, if you are using Combin CT, you cannot protect patient thyroid with a shield. Why? Because it's impossible to perform the X-ray examination. And probably you will have a spread of doses delivered to the patient. Also a factor of 10. During a thesis defense at Chulalongkorn University, one student present a comparison between the doses in different Combin CT. I was very proud that the minimum dose was given by an Italian international company. So my answer cannot be more detailed, but in Combin CT and partially also in orthopan tomography, you can have a big spread in patient dose. And in many cases, you can have extended field size covering probably, I don't know, thyroid. This means to have direct beam. Boom.
Okay, sir. And second one from Amir Ali. What are the guidelines of IAEA regarding pregnant female patients undergoing CT scan procedure, despite of the fact that there is no life risk at risk situation?
When we mention audio, repeat the question. Stay a little bit far from the microphone, otherwise it's
okay. Yeah. What are the guidelines of IAEA regarding pregnant female patient undergoing CT scan procedure, despite of the fact that there is no life risk at the risk situation?
While it's useful to follow the indication of IEC, first of all, which are the members of IEC? IEC is located, if I understand well, in the States, and there you have a committee formed by user from the United States and manufacturer. Which is the goal of IEC, that the manufacturer agree to build equipment respecting some criteria. From a certain point of view, it is okay. What is the problem? That the user cannot ask to the manufacturer something they cannot be able to produce. So, for example, IEC can determine which could be the focal size in the X-ray tube. If you ask to have a better focus size reduce, they say, no, sorry, these are our standard. In those determination, of course, also the hardware is important. Why? Because, for example, if you have in the equipment a very light total filtration of the X-ray beam, from the point of view of the image quality, you will have no changes. But the low energy, remember that X-ray beam has a continuous spectra. To have a reduced filtration means to have a higher number of X-ray having a low doses, and they are strongly attenuated by 10 centimeter of human tissue. What does it mean? That the contribution to the information is not given by low energy in the single X-ray, but is given by the primary beam attenuated that probably has a high component. You had to observe, for example, that when you are using digital detector, optimization bring you to use higher KV for the tube. Think a little bit why. Try to answer to my question. If you have higher kilovoltage, this means that you have a higher number of photons which have a higher, so the penetration of this primary B, they are less attenuated. And you can obtain to have this number of X-ray adding filtration. But adding filtration is okay for patient dose because takeoff from the beam attenuates strongly the low energy component. But if you reduce the number of photons, you will increase the time of exposure because the detector has a sensitivity which depends on the number of photons detected. So when you are using digital detector, you have a higher sensitivity. And the contrast, if the noise is low, you can amplify what you get. So what does it mean? This means that in building the X-ray equipment, if the detector is digital detector, you can use this opportunity, and you are moving to use high energy filter X-ray beam. Think a little bit to tomosynthesis. You can use the maximum kilovoltage could be 49 kV. But in the past, you were using kV maximum 30, 32. And now you have this component. This could be a very interesting lecture in basic how to make optimization, and it takes time. So the answer is this one. You see that if you are adopting equipment, and you are obliged in many countries, with IEC stamp, you will have in the correct use of the equipment, the best image quality with the minimum patient dose. About beam CT, the market sometimes is free, and so it's the worst equipment you had to optimize.
Sure.
Other question?
There are many questions and we have time limitation also. So try to finish your answer shortly.
Yeah.
Okay, next one from Muhammad Yasin. Is there any simple method or free software available to calculate effective dose of patient undergoing CT exam?
If first, oh my God, tell me again the question.
Yeah. Is there any simple method or free software available to calculate effective dose of patient undergoing CT exam?
Undergoing
CT exam.
CT? Ah, this is a good question. This is a good question. Why? Because when you are dealing with CT scan, the dose index is the CTDI. CTDI traditionally, from the very beginning, is something that you are measuring in a specific phantom, two phantom, which are polymethyl methacrylate, plastic, and is completely not correlated, not completely. Of course, if you double the CTDI, you double the patient dose. This is clear. But until now, you are obliged to record this dosimetric quantity. So, for example, when patients undergo to a CT scan, this information go to the PACS, you can read, and then you can calculate, evaluate those reference levels. Okay, what you can give to the patient, because this dose is an index and is the dose given to the perspex. There are some scientific papers which are correlating by Monte Carlo methods the CTDI with some specific organ dose within the body of the patient. So this is not for all the CT protocols, but anyway, you will be able to give a patient dose, organ patient dose, using this factor given by this scientific paper, and you have to multiply CTDI by this factor. In the future, probably far future, we will have some improvement. Why? Because when you have a spiral CT, you acquire a volume. You can construct the patient volume. And ICRU has also already adopted a electronic phantom. What does it mean, electronic phantom? They collect thousands of 3D patient scan, and they are able to build a virtual patient, which is only an electronic patient. In the future, probably you can modify in this field. For example, are very, very clever in South Korea, because you can find also in Germany, and you can change the shape and the shape of the internal organ, take into account the average, the patient size. But this will be the future. So at that point, you will be able to use this electronic phantom. Probably in the future, the electronic phantom could be the 3D volume obtained in a CT scan, comparing with some Monte Carlo calculation. But this could be the future. Until now, you will be able to give organ dose to patient only in a reduced number of CT scan.
Franco, can I tell something? Thank you for the
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you for the explanation how you calculate the dose in CT. Actually, there is two descriptors, CTDI and DPL. DPL is doses length product. And there are many software in the internet. Even you can go to the German X-ray Society, and there is a group of physicists. They are working. They are called here APT, and they give many software program. Yes, when you have CTDI and DLP, then as Professor Milano told, there is a calculating factor is from the Monte Carlo calculation, and the calculated effective doses. So you have enough software there. You can download. Even when you want a software, please write me. I can send you. No problem.
Yeah. There is a very good group, and also there is also PTP, I think, in the group.
Yes, PTV also. PTV.
They are pioneer in this kind of scientific work.
Yes, PTB. Yes.
Thank you, sir. Next one from Roshan Livingstone. What is the interventional reference point for measurement of peak skin dose in IR? Is it a constant? Are there constraints depending on the operator? Does backmeter include backscatter factors? Is this a reliable parameter to determine entrance surface dose?
Well, long question. The audio is a bit. Don't worry. So I will make some comment. I'm not sure to have understood the audio anyway, but anyway, don't worry. I invite you to when you are in interventional radiology, surely you have irradiation time of patient is very high. How you can characterize the Kerma rate? The Kerma rate. You must pay attention because there are indication which is the reference geometry. Because if you are in the surgery room, you can move the position of the X-ray tube, the detector. You can have the X-ray tube very close to the patient, or vice versa. You can have the X-ray tube far from the patient. Then you must follow the indication how you can determine dose rate or Kerma rate in reference condition without the patient, okay? Of course, when you measure this quantity, the patient dose is proportional to the time, and you are able to assign a value to the patient, take into account how many minutes the X-ray beam was irradiating the patient. You have any limit for the doses, and so you have any limit for the air Kerma. Why? Because what the surgery or the radiologist need, he must have, because no choice. The benefit of the patient is a good diagnosis, and if the interventional radiologist wants to see better and longer, way to limit. In the equipment, there is a kind of alarm that could be put, and probably it gives a signal after 5 minutes of irradiation, but that's all. Then it's there are no indication in the limit of the patient exposure in this case. Of course, this can have also, because very often the medical physicists have also the role of radio protection advisor. Of course, you must put attention to the time that the equipment is working in this way, because you have a high exposure of the eye, of the surgery, the anesthesiologist, and so on. So the limit is try. The medical doctor must avoid to overcome the threshold for skin dose damage, which are of the order of probably 1 hour X-ray radiation is enough to have, after a couple of months, skin irradiation. But on the other side, you must have evaluation, not only for this patient, but for many patients, which could be the scatter radiation, which can reach the eye or the body of the medical doctor and the professional body which are around the surgery room. Because in this case, you have dose limitation. So the problem is a double problem. I don't know, because I have not understood well the question, so it could be. Okay.
He may be asked, does DAP meter include backscatter factor?
Yeah.
Is this a reliable parameter to determine the entrance surface dose?
Yeah.
I do not think that DAP meter includes the backscatter factor. So
No.
I think can we measure the entrance surface dose from DAP?
There is
area product. Yeah, we measure disease area product, but we cannot determine the dose at entrance surface dose from the doses area product. Can you determine this? Not easy.
No, not easy, not easy. It could be an index, but not easy. There is another point, is this one. Some years ago, Dr. Toroi is from Finland. She presented to a IAEA meeting how to calibrate, to make calibration of DAP. Okay, and it's very important. Now she's officer in the agency. Well, she demonstrated, of course, this was her PhD thesis, that you had an uncertainty of up to 15–20% if you don't perform an accurate calibration of the DAP. So, for example, in the IAEA protocol I mentioned, technical report 457, there is the indication how to calibrate those area products. So joining the comment absolutely excellent of Professor Zaccaria, what is important is that if you are using something, and this is a quantitative evaluation of the dose, because in this case you must avoid as much as possible to overcome the threshold dose, you must calibrate DAP or CAP. Otherwise, 20%, you cannot believe to the indication. Agree with Professor Zaccaria that this is the indication of the DAP is a rough indication, because you are not in the right condition. But if you don't calibrate, it could be that patient has to suffer for some mistake.
Okay. Next one from Wilson. How long DRL are acceptable since its publication? As there is continuous development and modification of imaging system or machine, for how many years it is reliable?
How long about what system? No, tell me again, probably.
How long DRL?
Can I repeat?
Oh, okay. You must have a suitable statistic. You must have a suitable statistic, because if you have, for example, 50 patients for that equipment, this is not enough, because consider that you don't select the patients. So you must have the statistic. In my comment in dental unit, I criticized a little bit the scientific paper, because in one case you have 300 patients, in the other you have 100 patients. So the statistic must be, probably the selection would be reasonable every 6 months, every 6 months. And if you find a discrepancies between those reference level, you must, if the discrepancies is very high, you had to discuss with the medical doctor and the technician, considering also the protocol you are adopting for that specific X-ray examination, not only the equipment. Oh, yeah.
Jannat, next question, Jannat. Yeah,
Yeah.
one by one, or if
Yes, sir.
combined all question, yeah.
And next up from Ram Narayan Yadav. Why 75 percentile dose distribution for DRLS?
25. Why? Because adopt 75 percentile, and well, this is just
Convention.
a choice, because if you change this one, for example, if you take 75%, is acceptable. Think a little bit. If you accept 55%, it's too low. On the other side, if you bring from 75 to 95, we are discussing very few cases. So it's something which could be, in statistics, they are using quartile. And we adopt in the definition of those reference level something which is adopted normally in statistic. Please consider the statistic in this way has two phases. One is to find the index which describe the phenomenon. The other is making inference statistic. In this case, we are adopting those reference level is something which describe the phenomena. They can adopt the median, or they can adopt the mean, but normally in this case they are using the third quartile. This is an approach which is given us by statistics. And 6 months in a crowded radiology room could be okay. Not every week. For example, this let me make another comment. We have not discussed about quality control, and we have not discussed about which is included in our documents, specification, acceptance test, quality control, and so on. Quality control, the frequency of quality control must be justified by the probability of changes in the parameter you are controlling. So, for example, if it is not realistic to wait for a change in this parameter in some months, the frequency could be once a year. Surely once a year is a minimum. But if you have a parameter which is the probability of changing is higher, at that point you had to increase the frequency, and you say, okay, quality control will be made every 6 months, 3 months, and so on. This is, for example, because in radiotherapy, some quality control, rough quality control is made every day. When they switch on the machine, they are controlling the output in some way before irradiating.
Thank you, sir. For the time constraints, I cannot pick all the questions. Extremely sorry for that, because we already exist the time limit. And I will pick a last one from Suresh Padel. For setting DRL, is a single parameter like air karma, area product, enough or multiple parameters be evaluated for any procedure and equipment?
Yeah. Well, surely this is, you see that also in the recommendation, this dosimetric quantity is easy to be acquired. And so you can manage. Surely you had to, when you are making the evaluation on the patient, you must consider which is, in your opinion, I mean the medical physicist should have an idea which could be a reasonable dose reference level. But he cannot use the patient in this case because no justification of the patient irradiation. So at that point, the medical physicist must have out of routine check of cap and depth using phantom. Because if you have in phantom some in phantom you can have microcalcification, you can have bar pattern, you can have many specific topics that permit you to understand which is or evaluate the image quality. At that point, when you accept the equipment, that focus, that geometry, you have made the protocol of for X-ray examination before the patient, you must make optimization. And in the optimization, you must measure your, with using phantom, which is the acceptable dose in chest examination and so on. Then when you are moving to the dose reference level, you must have, because you had to done, you have already done the optimization process before entering in the clinic. And so you have to compare this value with the dose reference level that you will get after some times. And then this is the right approach. You cannot separate the optimization process before the use, the clinical use of the equipment at dose reference level. Probably during the use of the equipment, you can have some doubt as a medical physicist if you see a small increase in dose reference level. Why? Because this could be something related with the shape of the body and the statistical fluctuation. So on one side, you say, oh, if I can mention this fact, but when I will take some action. when I will spend my time to overcome the problem if possible. So this could be the limit. But anyway, surely you had to use phantom before to assess the image quality and to reduce the dose just before this could be made in commissioning. It takes time. It's not easy. Also in public hospital to have time to make this evaluation. For example, in Italy, just 6 months ago, a new national law introduced the obligation for the one who are dealing with the radiological practice to give the possibility to the medical physicist not only instrument, but also time to perform his own evaluation, but only 6 months ago. Otherwise, you want to make tests, okay, during the weekend or Sunday. Okay.
There are some requested questions. So I pick from Duminda. How to calculate effective dose using ESD? Is it need to place a phantom when measuring air karma without AEC?
Without, probably Mohamed was dialing the request on the chat. Dial directly to me the request.
Yes, Franco.
Yeah.
I will, because we have exceeded our time limit, I have taken this snapshot of the questions. So I will send you in your email, and
yeah,
getting the answer, we'll send
yeah,
the individual participants. We have
okay.
the names and dates.
Thank you.
Is it
Thank
okay?
you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, participants. We will send you all the question answered for your concern.
One point before stopping the session. Of course, you have my email address.
Yes.
And be free to ask me documents, material, comment, not only tomorrow, but also within 3 months, because it could be a pleasure. What I can do, I will do. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay, Zanna, please carry on.
Thank you so much, sir, for your inspiring words.
Yeah. Okay.
I also take
Thanks.
this opportunity to thank our speaker, Professor Franco Milano, for sparing his valuable time and knowledge with us. Thanks to all the participants for their interest in the program. I would like to thank Dr. Ghulam Abu Zakaria, Chairman SCMPCR, and the entire team of SCMPCR, whose tireless efforts made this platform functional for us.
Thank you.
I am requesting all of you kindly turn on your camera. Actually, we make a memory with you of this program. Please turn on your camera.
Hello, Sharma.
Hello, Sharma.
Thank you everyone once again. We appreciate your presence here. We'll see you next time. Our next program is on 6 June 2021 on Dosimetric in diagnostic radiology, calibration and verification of dose data. Thank you everyone. Stay safe. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Franco.
Oh,
See you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
we have changed our phone number, okay? Ciao.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everyone. I would like to welcome you for tomorrow lecture.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody.